Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Metal video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the red zone against Android 17 and Android 18. Now Android 17 and Android 18 I think is a pretty interesting fight. You obviously start out against Android 17, you start out against the Android 18, and then you kind of face Android 18, and then you kind of face both of them. And the final phase, they do nullify key blast based supers, so you do have to be wary of that. You have to make sure that you're careful of those key blast based supers, that you're being on top of them, that you're tracking them, you're making sure that you're not having too many in your team. You want to make sure that you have damage. And I wanted to have a pretty good kind of, how can I say, like Android Cell Saga team. But unfortunately, I do, just with a surprise guest, just with a surprise unit. But the whole team is pretty much, well themed, except for Gohan. But we can forgive it. I think overall Gohan's a pretty cool unit, and he's just there to kind of assist us in terms of damage. But the rest of the team I'm trying to keep, thematically seated on that, like, kind of like, how can I put it, Android Cell Saga, Gohan and Trunks kind of situation. Maybe not the best idea, but I thought it could be fun. And yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, I think it could be a pretty little nice team. So we've got in this team a couple of interesting units. We've got a double strength Goku Gohan lead, which I think is pretty good coverage. We've got like the Super Saiyan Goku's family coverage, which is pretty good. But we also have that extra 30% for Android Cell Saga units, which covers a fair chunk of the team. AGL Gohan, both of the leads, physical Gohan. So we got some really decent coverage. In terms of the rotations, generally speaking, we're looking at syncing up a AGL LR Gohan with one of the strength Goku Gohan combos. Then in the other rotation, we're looking at mainly syncing up the physical Gohan alongside the AGL Trunks, because I think that will give us some pretty good coverage. So that's obviously something that should be pretty helpful. We then obviously have the physical Ultimate Gohan and kind of just, doing his thing, dropping down damage, and I think that's what you want him to do. I don't really think there's like a massive amount of rocket science required to kind of operate and facilitate that Gohan. So yeah, I would say overall a fairly simple team build. I think it's consistent enough. We have the int Goku, the Yardrat Goku, and he's there for a couple reasons. He's got like his ability to counter, which I think is quite big, and that damage reduction that he has is pretty solid. He also has some favorable type matchups, if you really want to get down to it. He does have that fight against the tech Android 17, which obviously helps him out. He doesn't really have a type disadvantage at any point, so that does work for him. The final phase is against an AGL unit, so it is something you're going to have to always consider or be considerate of. AGL units, you don't want to bring strength units. Ideally, obviously we're going to be transforming the strength Goku Gohan, making sure that we have them in their Gohan state, or their exchanged state, I should say. And this is going to kind of leave them in a good position, in a good solid position going forward. And I think that's realistically probably puts us into a nice kind of situation whereby we have the right kind of components. We don't have any glaring weaknesses. We do have maybe a little bit too many key attacks. I think that's just something you have to, I don't want to say accept, but it's always something you plan around, but doesn't necessarily mean it's easy to yes, you plan around it, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily so easy to avoid. Like, just planning around something doesn't always mean you can easily avoid that situation. And I think, yeah, this is one of those situations. We do have a couple key blast supers. We are relying on follow-up attacks, especially from AGL Gohan, who we will be transforming. But we're going to need him to do follow-up attacks, as his main attack is actually a key-based one. So his attacks, his whole key, based kind of aura doesn't really help us out too much. And so we obviously need to be somewhat coherently aware and just on top of things when it comes to this, because like I say, it's not so cut and dry. It's not so like easy when you don't have the right type of super attacks. Now, if you're wondering how do I know what type of super attacks my units do, well, it's pretty straightforward. If there is a little key blast next to your unit's super attack in the icon, then they do a key based super, and I think you have to accept that, or be aware of that, basically, to cut a long story short. But yeah, outside of that, I'd say, honestly speaking, not too much that you need to be aware of. The fight is relatively difficult. I think it's got a pretty tough opening. The units start out quite strong. It's not like they aren't strong units. I think that's super important to facilitate, especially when you're dealing with units like this. When you're dealing with people like this, I think you have to almost anticipate that, yes, there is that situation whereby you could be stuck in a difficult situation, and I think we have to accept that you need to be a little bit lucky when it comes to your super attacks. At the end of the day, that's really what you need to be aware of. If you're aware of that, you should be more than fine. Obviously, the goal here is realistically to control and just have a good amount of damage outside of the key blast supers. So transforming Gohan is a very key component to that, because Gohan being transformed, even his follow-up attacks tend to do a pretty huge volume of damage. Also, Gohan's ultimate or active skill is unfortunately not going to be something that's incredibly useful. Gohan's active skill is going to be relatively limiting because of a couple of reasons. Obviously, the fact that it's key based, it also means it won't be able to proc its interrupt, and so these are things that are unfortunate. They're just things that you have to accept realistically, and when I say accept, it's things that are difficult to work around. Ideally, of course, you'd love it if your units got all of their abilities off and everything, but in this situation we do kind of sit okay, Gohan's not going to be able to use his active skill. Doesn't mean he's bad, just means that unfortunately he does suffer when it comes ultimately at the end of the day to that whole keeping us in control and giving us some kind of utility. That's just the unfortunate side of things. It's not the absolute end of the world, but it's just one of those things. But I think at the end of the day, Gohan's pretty good. Still does great damage because he's physical on both ends of the spectrum. I think that's more crucial than most things. To have units be, in that kind of situation where they are, strong damage dealers that can just dish out damage to 17 and 18, I think that's good for us in the long run. Obviously you'd love it for your units to have good damage all around, but you have to also accommodate the fact that you're building a fluid team and you don't always have the absolute best situation to facilitate all of these units at the end of the day. I think for me, it was a pretty fun attempt. I don't think there was anything too difficult. like when I say too difficult, I think 1 or 2 runs. I don't think there's this huge like inability to do things or take on the event. I don't think it's too restrictive. So yeah, overall it was pretty good. But that's basically me. That's my team build. I think it was a pretty fun one. Yeah, and we'll just take a look and see how things go in the future. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good start. It's a nice starting point. I do think it's a pretty good difficulty. So yeah, we'll just see how much more difficult they get. But that's it for me. Bye.